Hello and welcome to the E-BARQ webinar. Now, today I'm coming to you from Edgecliff in Sydney, so you'll have to excuse the city noises outside. There's a, I don't know, garbage truck or something, and also in Edgecliff I'm sitting right underneath the train line. So every now and then a train is going to go over, so I apologise if you can't hear me well from time to time, but I'll try and be aware of that. I also have my trusty blue microphone, so hopefully the sound won't be too bad. Welcome to my American friends. It's always so lovely to see the Americans and the Canadians jumping on early. Susan's just come in from her horses. 10-year-old neighbour took a bunch of photos to send me, but none turned out. No, oh no. Get your 10-year-old neighbour to do a better job next time and send me the photos of your horses. I'd love to see them. Dale, I see you're also here. Welcome. You're just come back from feeding your horses as well. And you have sent me, I've seen in my inbox, you've sent me some photos of your Mustangs. Thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to seeing those. I haven't looked at them yet because this weekend I was running clinics in Canberra and Braidwood, which were fantastic, by the way. And it's really exciting to see these horses over time. And that's basically what we're talking about today, because we're talking about E-BARQ, which I will start in a minute. But at the weekend on Sunday, I had a clinic with, we called it a trainer's clinic. So basically I was teaching people that do a bit of training themselves and people that have been working with me for a long time. And it was fantastic to see how they were getting on, to see the progress they'd made. And it was amazing because watching people that have got such a good handle on pressure release and such a good idea of how to break a lesson down for a horse, the progress they were making in one session, one day clinic was incredible. I was really, really pleased to see that. It was fantastic. Now, why that's relevant to today's discussion is that today we're talking about what is my PhD project, which is a project called E-BARQ, which stands for the Equine Behaviour Assessment and Research Questionnaire. Now, it's behaviour assessment because it's a survey, a questionnaire. So we're going to be asking all sorts of questions about your horse's behaviour. And it's a research questionnaire because all of the data that we collect from this survey is going to go into a secure data repository, and researchers are going to be able to access that. So they'll be able to get that information. It's going to be really interesting. And Susan has just asked Dale, would you come to a Canada clinic for trainers next August? Yes, or we'll fix up one for Dale in your area. Anyway, we shall talk about clinics later. Today we're talking about the E-BARQ survey. So the E-BARQ survey is a longitudinal study, and this means that we're testing horses, or we're getting horses or owners to take this survey once every 6 months. So we're going to see the changes that we make in the horse's training and management and how those changes reflect in the horse's behaviour. So the survey tool, it comes in two parts. So the first part is all about the demographics. So the first part collects data on the horse's breeding, when it was acquired, and it also collects data on the owner. So, you know, when you started to ride, how long you've owned horses for, how many horses you currently own, how many horses you currently ride. So all about your experience and about your riding disciplines. Now, E-BARQ is the sister survey of C-BARQ. That, of course, is the canine version. And that's collected data on over 85,000 dogs. Now, you know, you said that, oh, that sounds like a lot. But horses are so much more interesting, let's be honest. So we need to beat that number. And I'm sure we will. And it's also been used in more than 70 studies. Now, they've found out some really interesting things looking at the information they've collected with C-BARQ. They've really found out some interesting things. One of them that we were looking at recently was the fact that, you know, how we we always say with dogs, you know, if your dog is aggressive, a male aggressive dog, you get it neutered, and it will be less aggressive. Well, actually, what they found was that the dogs that had been neutered were more aggressive than the ones that hadn't been. And so that is really interesting. And a lot of things, I think, with horses that we think are true aren't necessarily true. It's just that we've never really looked at them. You know, for example, does it make a horse easier to ride or less likely to bark if we lunge it for 20 minutes before we ride it? Does it make it behave better under saddle if we do that? We don't know, because we've never tested it. Some people might think it does. Some people think, oh, maybe that gets the edge off the horse, or maybe that calms the horse down. Other people might say, no, actually that just makes the horse more fit, so next time you'll have to lunge the horse for longer. You know, does doing liberty work make the horse better in other areas of your horsemanship? So does doing liberty work improve your under saddle work? Again, we don't know. We've never looked at it. So the idea with E-BARQ is to have a lot of questions. We're going to ask a lot of questions and see how they fit together, so that researchers can come in later, and maybe you'd like to know the difference between, let's say, thoroughbred horses. Let's say, does racing a horse make it more likely to have stopping problems later? Like, if a horse is raced, do you think that that affects how it stops for the rest of its riding career after it comes off the track? And you've got an off-the-track horse, you retrain it for riding. Is it always going to be more difficult to stop than another horse? And of course, you know, you can't compare how an off-the-track thoroughbred stops to how, you know, a Shetland pony stops or a Clydesdale stops. So you want to compare like with like. So you would take the data from E-BARQ, and you could look at the off-the-track horses that have actually raced. You could look at the off-the-track horses that prepared to race and didn't race. And then you could look at the thoroughbred horses that never raced and never prepared to race. And you could see later in life, were those horses still easy or difficult to stop? Is it a thing about thoroughbred horses that make them easy or difficult to stop? Or is it some basic training that they have right at the beginning of their racing career that makes them easy or difficult to stop later in life? And we can all speculate on these things, and let's be honest, we do speculate on these things a lot. But we don't really have any hard data, and that's what E-BARQ is about. So after we've got that demographic data, that stays with you. So let's say you've got 6 horses. You do the demographic data, and we know all about that for each horse. And then we move into the management, training, and behavior questions. Now, these questions you can do every 6 months. So this is when we find out the really interesting stuff, because we find out then, let's say management. Now, in management, we're going to look at the housing. We're going to look at how often the horse is ridden and how often the horse is trained. We're going to look at the sort of tack that you use. And that will change over time, won't it? You know, so when you come back, because you can do the survey every 6 months. Every 6 months you come back, and we're going to see changes in the tack that you use and in the management that you have with that horse. Then we're going to look at the training. So that'll be the discipline you're training in, whether or not the horse is ridden by beginners, whether you have lessons, or whether you train your own horse, if the horse is trained by a professional, the discipline that the professional is training. All of those sorts of things, the activities you do with the horse, the lessons you have, or whether you take the horse out and about, you know, to go to clinics like I had at the weekend, all of those sorts of things. And finally, we're going to take a really in-depth look at the horse's behavior. So what are those like everyday behaviors that the horse does? You know, does the horse, how responsive is the horse under saddle? You know, how responsive is the horse to leg or to rein cues? How responsive, some horses aren't ridden. So how responsive is your horse when you're leading it on the ground? How responsive generally to ground work is your horse? And what's the difference between its ridden and ground behaviors? What behaviors, you know, are there in there that are really good? What behaviors aren't so good? You know, are there behaviors in there that, you know, aren't as good. And we'll give you a scale to answer these things. So, you know, does your horse kick? And it might be, you know, never kicks, you know, it sometimes kicks in certain situations, and there'll be a scale. So what happens when you come back in 6 months' time and take this again, your management will have changed. So perhaps you've changed riding discipline. That might be quite interesting. You come around to the behaviour questions and you might find, oh, look at that, my horse no longer pins its ears when I ask for canter, or, you know, things will have changed. The behaviour of the horse will have changed, and you'll be able to monitor that. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how you'll be able to monitor that, because that's sort of what E-BARQ is all about. I just want to talk to you first of all and just explain to you how E-BARQ came about, and how we came up with the questions. So we started earlier. Well, we actually started many years ago. E-BARQ was first conceived, the idea was conceived back in 2012, and there were a group of researchers at Sydney University that began this and started sort of putting surveys and things together and having a really good think about how this was going to work. I then took over as my project for my PhD project at the beginning of last year. So I'm 18 months, 19 months into that now. So we did run an E-BARQ 1.0, and we had a lot of questions. And so we gave that, we got 1,300 responses to that survey, which was a good number. That gave us a really good idea of, you know, where the problems were, what questions we needed to ask. And what we did was we did something called a factor analysis on that, which groups the questions together. And that enabled us to lessen the number of questions we needed to ask you. I know horse people love talking about their horses, and it was amazing for me to see how keen people were to take the survey. We had, with the E-BARQ 1.0, we had 41 demographic questions. So those are all the questions asking about the horse's breed and about your riding experience. And then for the ridden horses, we had 227 questions. And for the unridden horses, and of course that will change. If you have a young horse that hasn't yet been put under saddle, you'll be sent to the unridden survey. And then next time you come back, your horse might then be under saddle, you'll be sent to the ridden survey. So it just depends whether your horse has been ridden in the last 6 months or not, depending on which set of questions you get sent. Basically, they're the same questions, but there are more ridden questions than unridden questions, because we're asking about the horse's responsiveness under saddle and those sorts of things. So we get a few extra. So we had total questions there. We had 268 for the ridden questions. That includes demographic. And for the whole survey, for the unridden horse, we had 218. That's still a lot of questions. And we came up with a number of factors. What a factor is questions that group together. And because the survey is so wide, we decided that it was easier to break it down into 3 different sections. The first one was what we called a personality thing. So those were personality factors, with things like, you know, how shy the horse was from man-made objects. You know, does it shy away from man-made objects? How secure the horse feels in familiar environments? How reactive the horse is to non-equine animals, so cows and things like that. How compliant the horse is with unfamiliar human care interventions, so things like the vet. How defensive the horse is to other equines, and how insecure the horse is in a challenging environment, maybe how agitated the horse gets. So those are sort of what we called personality factors. We had 26 of those, so questions that grouped together that fitted into that sort of personality thing. Then we had equitation factors. We came up with 16 different factors, so 16 different groups of questions. And those were sorts of things like bridle-related conflict, responsiveness under saddle, responsiveness to steering, deceleration, did the horse rear or bark, how responsive the horse was to verbal cues, how trainable the horse was. And the final one, we had 13 maintenance and gear factors. And these were all sorts of things to do with the type of rider, you know, experienced riders or professional riders or beginner riders, the type of saddle you use, whether the horse needed pre-ride exercise or not, to lunge or round bend the horse before you ride, whether the horse went on many outings, so go to clinics and shows and lessons, maintenance procedures used, and also the time people spend with their horses. So those were all our factors. So when we looked at that factor analysis, it actually enabled us to remove 40 questions. It seemed redundant. You know, they were giving us the same information. So that was great because that made the survey a little bit shorter. If to keep a question in, it had to fit into a factor. So it had to be relevant to something. Or maybe it was just a question that we were really interested in and didn't want to lose. And there were a few like that. There's a question, let me think of one. One was, grinding teeth. Does your horse grind its teeth? And it didn't fit into any factors, but it's really interesting. So we kept it in there. We really wanted to know. The other one that might interest you, and it has always interested me, is yawning. We ask questions about whether the horse yawns a lot. And do you know some horses seem to yawn a lot? Like some horses yawn before you work them. Some horses yawn during work. Some horses yawn after work. I've always thought stallions yawn more than other horses, but I'm not sure if that's just because I've owned so many stallions. And people say it's because they're stressed. People say it's because they're relaxing. People say it's because they're tired. People say it's because they're happy. Nobody knows. Everyone has an idea, but nobody knows. So we kept the yawning question in because it'd be really interesting to see. And we can look, you know, in a few years' time, we can look and say, okay, let's have a look at those horses that yawn. What else do they have in common? What's that correlate with, you know? Is it perhaps the more stressed horses, or is it a sign that the horse is being relieved of stress? Who knows? But E-BARQ will tell us. So there were 48 questions like that. So basically there were 88 questions that failed the factor analysis. 40 we removed and 48 we retained regardless, because we're a bit like that. We like to have lots of answers about our horses. So that was what we did. And we also added a few questions. Having done all these questions, 268 questions, I think, for the ridden horse, we put in the E-BARQ 1.0 an open text feedback box. And we said, thank you so much for answering all these questions about your horse. Is there anything you'd like to add? Or do you have any feedback about the survey? Basically, we put the box there thinking people are going to write, oh my goodness, this survey is so long. You know, I'm never going to do this again. Nobody wrote that. Thank you. The feedback was actually really beautiful, because having answered all these questions, the one thing that people did was give us more information on their horse. Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. Some people wrote reams of information. And I think the best thing about that for me, reading that, was how obvious it was how much people love their horses. It was incredible, the love that people have for their horses. And the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. We had a couple of people sort of said, you don't have a question about this, or you're missing a question about that, or you didn't have my breed in. So that was all really easy to deal with, because, you know, we've added all those questions that we needed. We've also added the biggest thing was that we didn't have were veterinary related issues. So there were a lot of people, horses with Cushing's or laminitis or colic prone horses, and there wasn't a question about that. So we've added a nice big matrix about that so we can get all of that information in. But otherwise, people were amazing. They were just telling us more about their horses. And a lot of people said, I really enjoyed doing the survey. And what doing the survey showed me was how fantastic my horse is. And that was actually really lovely for me to read that. You know, these people had sat there and they'd answered all these questions about their horse, and it had just reminded them of how much they love their horse and how fabulous their horse is, and what more could you want? So E-BARQ 2.0 is going to be released on the 18th of December this year, which is very exciting. Now, it's going to be a little shorter. So I'm going to tell you the number of questions you'll have to answer. There's 48 demographic questions. There's 175 written and 129 non-ridden. So the total survey, if your horse is currently under saddle or has been ridden in the last 6 months, there'll be 223 questions. And if your horse is not yet under saddle or hasn't been ridden in the last 6 months, there'll be 177 questions. And that will get you, if you do the E-BARQ survey, that will get you an E-BARQ dashboard, and you'll be given access to the E-BARQ hub. So let's have a little think about a little discussion about what the E-BARQ hub is. We want to collect data on horses, and it's going to be, E-BARQ will be useful for different groups of people. It's not going to be used in the same way for everybody. So basically, we feel that there are sort of 4 different groups of people that are going to use E-BARQ. And those are the academics, which I talked about earlier. So researchers and things that want to find out information about horses. They can look that up, and they can look up the data that we've collected with E-BARQ, and they can look for similarities or differences in their horses. Oh, I'm using the wrong microphone. Let me try that. Okay, I hope that improves my sound. Has it been bad? Would somebody tell me? How has the sound been, Susan? Anyway, somebody tell me. I hope it's all right. I've just changed microphone because I just noticed that I wasn't using the right microphone. Anyway, the next group of people are going to be the professionals. So the vets and behaviourists, I think, will find E-BARQ very useful. So they can get their clients to do an E-BARQ, and then they can see changes over time. The next group of people are practitioners. Now, that's people like coaches, riding instructors, horse trainers, those sorts of people, even farriers and other horse professionals, like other horse practitioners. And the final group is the enthusiast group, which covers most of us, you know. And a lot of you will fit into a number of those groups. You know, I myself fit into the academic group, and the professional group and the practitioner group. I fit into all 4 groups, actually, and a lot of you will. And so what that means, basically, is it's going to appeal even more to you, and I'll discuss why now. The biggest group out of those 4, of course, is the enthusiast group. And so, you know, it's a bit of a pyramid. We have the academics up the top because there aren't very many of them. And then the professionals, there are a few more professionals. There are more practitioners than there are professionals. But there are lots of enthusiasts. There's lots of people that just love horses and just love to ride and compete and not compete and just have horses sitting in the paddock and all of those sorts of things. That's where all the horses are. That's where all the data is. Those are the important people to E-BARQ. They're important people because without those people, we don't have any data. And without data, we don't have any information. So we know that, you know, if you build it, they will come, says Kevin Costner. But that is not true. And so what we needed to do was we needed to make sure that everybody from those stakeholder groups was getting something out of E-BARQ. You know, if we're going to ask you to take 20 to 30 minutes of your time to give us data or information on your horse, we need to give you something back, and we're well aware of that. So I did a survey and asked people what it is they wanted, and that was quite interesting. And we sent that out, and I've got figures here actually of who that went to. So it went to 969 people. 63% of them fitted into that enthusiast group. 18% fitted into the practitioners group. So that's the coaches and horse trainers and things. Just 9% were academics, and another 10% were professionals, vets and behaviourists and so forth. Anyway, we asked them what it is they wanted or what they found frustrating about either collecting data or using data, finding data on horse behaviour and training, or just generally what they found frustrating sort of within the, let me see how we put it, when it comes to gathering and accessing large-scale data on horse behaviour and training, what do you find difficult? That was what we asked the academics. With the horse enthusiasts, we said, when it comes to learning about horse behaviour and training, what do you find difficult? And across the board, each group said there's no standardized tool. Like, there's no sort of survey you can do that will test to see how your horse maybe compares to others, or, you know, there's no test. Can I do X, Y, and Z, or can I ask these questions and know this horse behaves in this certain way? So a standardized tool was something every group wanted, and they said they couldn't find. The next thing was access to peer-reviewed work, and there's a lot more every day in the media about peer-reviewed work, and that's the scientific work being done with equitation science and other sciences about horse behaviour and training. And it is very hard to access. Unless you happen to be an academic and have access to a library, then it is very hard to access this work. So that was a big problem for people. The next thing was, which came out not in the academics but in the other three groups, was finding advice. And this was actually really sad, because a lot of people said it's very confusing. You know, there's so many different ideas out there, and you go out and quite often you don't actually ask for advice, you get given a lot of advice, and often it's not very good, and they find that's the hardest thing, is finding good advice. And that was basically what we got. The other thing that was found in both the enthusiast and practitioner groups was it was really hard to tell the difference between what was myth and what was science, and it was very confusing. People were very confused. And a lot of other people just discussed current problems they had with their horse, so quite specific problems. So what we decided to do was, we decided that we were going to have to do something about those things that people were finding very frustrating. And the first thing was, for the academics, what they wanted was 43% of them, in fact, wanted to be able to access a data repository so that they could find information. And another 43% of them wanted a standardized behavioral assessment tool. That was something that came through with a lot of other groups as well, but the academics especially, they wanted those two things. The professionals were very interested in the data repository as well. They also wanted, 30% of them said that they wanted somewhere to find out information about behaviour and temperament, so probably breed related perhaps. And another 20% said they'd like somewhere where they could compare one client's horse with another client's horse. So this might be a behaviourist, you know, who comes across, you know, an off-the-track, 10-year-old off-the-track thoroughbred that's maybe been off the track for 6 months or something, and it would like to see how that compares to other 10-year-old off-the-track thoroughbreds that have been off the track for 6 months. And that would be interesting to know. The practitioners wanted somewhere where they and or their clients could keep more regular records. So the E-BARQ is only running once every 6 months, and they wanted somewhere where they could keep daily records or weekly records of the horse's behaviour and training. They also wanted somewhere where they could compare their horse or their client's horse with another horse's behaviour. So, you know, the chestnut Arab mare, how does that chestnut Arab mare compare to this chestnut Arab mare? Those sorts of things. And then they also were interested in recording their horse's behaviour every 6 months, but that was the least likely thing that they were interested in, which is basically the E-BARQ tool. The enthusiasts were also mostly interested in having a something where they could keep really regular records, so daily or weekly records of their horse's training and behaviour. And we want, 35% of them said that that was what they most wanted. 25% of them said they wanted somewhere where they could compare their horse's behaviour with others, and less than 10% were interested in what would be the main E-BARQ tool. So that sort of happened exactly the way we thought it would. So less than 10% said they'd like somewhere where they can record their horse's behaviour every 6 months. Whereas with the academics, 43% said they wanted that. So this is what we expected. So the enthusiasts are less likely to be interested in giving that data to us, and that's the data that we're after. So we had to make it more appealing to the enthusiasts, because we're very interested in their data, and they were equally keen to get some sort of logbook where they could keep their horses, keep records of their horses daily or weekly or monthly, whatever they like, really, some sort of logbook, and that ability to compare their horse with other horses. And those two things came across as very important for both the enthusiasts, the biggest group, the 67% of people that we surveyed, and also with the practitioners, which was the next largest group. So we're actually doing both of those things. The comparing your horse's behavior to others. What's going to happen when you do your E-BARQ, which is the 20 to 30 minutes once every 6 months? At the end of your E-BARQ, we're going to give you a little graph. Now, the graph will show you where your horse ranks in 14 different categories. And I'm just going to read you the categories quickly. Trainability, rideability, boldness, handling compliance, working compliance, easy to stop, forward going, human social confidence, non-human social confidence, novel object confidence, touch sensitivity, easy to load, independence, and repetitive behaviors. Now, 14 of these will come up. What will also come up is where your horse sits on that and the average. So you'll see what the average horse is and where your horse fits. Now, as we collect more data, you'll be able to manipulate that graph a little bit. So let's say you've got a 10-year-old off-the-track thoroughbred, you'll be able to dial that in. So you'll be able to compare your 10-year-old off-the-track thoroughbred with other 10-year-old off-the-track thoroughbreds and see if your 10-year-old off-the-track thoroughbred is more trainable or more rideable or has better handling compliance than others. You'll also be able to see how your horse changes over time. So you might have scored on trainability when you take your E-BARQ on the 18th of December, which I know you're going to do. You might score, let's say, 6.5 on trainability. You might come back 6 months later, take another E-BARQ and score 7.2. You go, wow, my horse has become more trainable. And then you can work out why that is, because you'll have record of all these things you've been doing with your horse, and it's ended up making your horse more trainable or more rideable or bolder or better at handling, easier to stop, all these really important features, and you'll be able to see that difference in your horse. So you'll be able to compare your horse over time. You'll be able to compare your horse with other horses. There's an aeroplane going over. I don't know how loud that is for you. So that was the comparing horses feature. The other feature that people were really interested in was the one where they could keep regular daily or weekly or monthly records of their horse's training and behavior. And we're calling this the horse's logbook, and it will enable you to do just that. So this is a mobile app. You can use it on your phone. You can have your horse's logbook there. You'll be able to, once you've done your E-BARQ, that will populate into your app, and you go into the app, and so each day that you work with the horse, you can enter in what you did, how the horse went, and how long you worked for, what you worked on, all of those things that you want to enter in. You can put pictures up of your horse. You can upload pictures of your horse. And you can keep all your veterinary records there. You can keep any appointment you might have if the horse has got an appointment with the farrier. All of that information can be kept in your horse's logbook right there on your E-BARQ dashboard and accessible on your mobile phone. The next thing that people had a real problem with was access to peer-reviewed material. Now, this is a difficult area because not all that much is open access. And so what we are looking at doing is having a library of information within the Equitation Science, the International Society for Equitation Science, having a library of information there that E-BARQ users can access. And we're working on that now, and we're hoping to have that ready for you when you come in December and do your first E-BARQ. So basically, in December, when you come and do your first E-BARQ, you'll be able to log in to the E-BARQ hub. And once you've done your first E-BARQ, you'll be in there, you'll be registered, and you'll have access to the horse's logbook. And at the end of your first E-BARQ, you'll also get your share and compare graph where you can see how your horse compares to other horses as well. Once you've done one, then you can log all your horses. So you can have as many as you like, as many horses as you have. That would be fantastic. It would be great to get all of that information. And it'll be a great place for you to actually keep track of how your horse is going and how your horse is progressing. And Dale says, I have numerous horses. Is there a place to enter each? Absolutely. And yes, you will, Dale. You will be able to enter information without a phone. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to get back to you about that for the horse's logbook. I'm going to have to ask our developers about that. It may only be on a Android or on an Android or iOS device. I think that you can't. I don't think you can enter the detailed daily information on a computer as yet. But I'm not sure. I will get back to you on that, Dale, because you might be able to. You can certainly use the horse's logbook on your Android or iOS phone or iPad. The E-BARQ survey you can do on any platform, and hopefully it will be just as easy to use on your phone as it will on your computer. But it is, bear in mind, and I will say this, before December the 18th when it comes out, it is a big survey. I would advise you to get a cup of coffee and sit down at your computer if you possibly can, because it's just a more comfortable place to do it. And you can then go straight into your horse's logbook and load pictures up of your horse and get the whole hub looking beautiful and ready to go. And Susan goes, wow, this is amazing. You did the E-BARQ version 1, good girl. But had no idea where it was going. Well, yeah, it went down so well, like it was so popular. But then when we looked at it, we thought it's great, and people will happily do that once, but we need to get people really enthusiastic about it. We need a reason for them to come back. And the beauty of the horse's logbook, which I think is really going to appeal to people, it's really going to appeal to the users, which means we'll get lots of people into E-BARQ and getting involved with E-BARQ and really helping horses. This is a longitudinal study. This is all about horse welfare. This is about changing the way we do things and making it better for the horse. And it's a great way of doing it because you can just see what works over time. And nobody's identified. A lot of people on their E-BARQ feedback, when I was reading it, I was sort of thinking, I think they think that I'm reading their answers, but there's thousands, there's absolutely thousands, and nobody is identified. It's all completely anonymous. So what happens is your data goes into the database, and we can use that data, and the only identifying thing will be it will identify the behavior with the horse, but nothing else. So it really is a wonderful tool for us. But by adding the logbook will give us a lot more information as well, because we'll know, the horses that are doing XYZ on a weekly basis, you know, we can see then how much better they're getting, or how much worse they're getting, or, you know, whatever it might be. You know, we can really see, we can really dial down on these changes. One of the big problems with horse research is that it's very expensive. It's very expensive to get big numbers, and it's very difficult to get big numbers of horses. And while that's ideal, you know, it would be absolutely ideal, you know, to have 1,000 horses that we tested and we followed, you know, over a 6-year period. It's never going to happen. And honestly, the best people to be able to give us this data are you. You are the best people. You know the horse. You're with the horse every day. You can see changes in that horse's behavior. We know what to do with the data when we get it. And so together, I think, you know, we're on a winning thing. And Susan, you don't have a phone either. Yeah, okay. That I'm sure we'll be fine. I'm going to find out about the horse's logbook, and to see if we can make sure that that will work on a computer as well. So we can certainly do that. I'm actually in the university tomorrow, and I will have a word with them right then. At the moment, I know that you can certainly use it on an Android or iOS phone or iPad or tablet. So it shouldn't be a big deal, I don't think, but that's good. Anyway, so that's it really from me today. I hope you enjoyed the little E-BARQ talk. If you go along to the website, you will see candoequine.com. Obviously, up the top in the navigation, one of the pages is E-BARQ, and you can see the latest presentation that I did at the International Society for Equitation Science in Rome a couple of weeks ago. That is up there, so go and have a look at that. And there's also a little bit about the development of E-BARQ there as well. And of course, there's the paper that was recently published in the Journal of, what journal was it? Journal of Veterinary Behaviour. I knew it was one of those, which was all about the sort of pilot study that we did for E-BARQ. And that's called Demographic Management and Behavioural Influences on Negative Reinforcement in Horses, something like that. It's on my website. All right, I will see you. Kate, to answer your question, yes. Good. Okay, Dale, you meant completely unhandled horses. Yeah, that's a really good topic, actually. And isn't that interesting that you ask that? Because that is going to be that's going to be something else that will come up with E-BARQ, because we're asking you those questions. You know, when was this horse first handled? And we're going to find out how much handling this horse has had. And so I don't have anything, I don't think, that's directly related to completely unhandled horses. I have done a lot of work with Brumbies. Dale, if you want to talk to me at any time, I'm happy to discuss that with you. And it would be quite an interesting thing to put together. I will work on putting together a module for the training on that, because I've got quite a lot of good video of first touch, first contact, that sort of thing with completely unhandled horses. Yeah, for sure. All right, good. I will see you Facebook Live during the week. Otherwise, if you don't make it to that, I will see you next week right here on our webinar. Bye.